Hello and welcome to this next interview where I'm delighted to be joined by Katie Stidolph, aka the Savvy Stoic. How are you doing, Katie?
I'm great, thanks, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. So this video is going to go out on day 5 of the Newcastle Startup Week online event, which is themed as Keep Going or Pivot. So I think a talk about Stoicism is ideal for this day. So do you want to? Well, I'll start by saying how we kind of got to know each other. So I think the first time we met, you came to Startup Week. Was it last year or the year before was the first time you came?
It was last year, yeah.
Last year, 2019. And then you started coming to some of the Founders Friday events, the monthly Founders Friday events, and we've been having chats obviously in the bar afterwards, and like after the events and during the events and stuff. And you were telling me about Stoicism, and I was interested in that. But I think the first time I really understood and got into it was when we went on the carpaway axe throwing.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And all of us went for lunch afterwards, and I was sat next to you, and we had a really long conversation about Stoicism. And I was just like, wow, like I've never met anyone who talks about Stoicism and is into Stoicism as you, but also it just really resonated with me, like everything that you were saying about it, and I just went away from that thinking, this sounds like something that I will be into. And since then I have got really, really into it, and thanks to lots of good advice and recommendations from you, I've totally embraced Stoicism. So do you want to start by saying, it might be hard to say this, but what is Stoicism?
Yeah, sure. So Stoicism it's an ancient philosophy that was founded in Athens. So it's Hellenistic philosophy basically, and it's founded on rationality. So it basically says that the goal of life is to live in accordance with nature and virtue. So virtue for the Stoics it's kind of like the highest value for the Stoics. And when I say nature, we sort of mean like rational nature. So also the natural world, because it's obviously important to exist in a virtuous way with the natural world. But the Stoics believed that we didn't have any irrational part of the soul at all. We're total rational beings. And Aristotle kind of wrote a book on Nicomachean Ethics, and his take was that so we are similar with loads of other animals, but what distinguishes us from the rest of the animal kingdom is that we think rationally. So Stoicism is founded on rational thought and the basis that to live a happy life, you have to live rationally and basically not get caught up in bad passions or emotions, which is very easily done. So that's like the foundation of it. And then there's 4 virtues, which for a Stoic you're meant to live in accordance with. So the first one's courage. So that is basically the courage to stand up for what you believe in, to do what's right, to make action on what you need to do. And then the second one's justice. So Marcus Aurelius has a quote, and he says, just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. So obviously, when I say justice, a lot of people might think of like the court or the judicial system, but it's generally more justice in a social context. So kind of just acting justly towards your community or your family, your loved ones, so just doing the right thing. And then the third one is temperance, which is also moderation. So basically, you need to know what to do and you need to know the right amount of what to do. So if you think about it in going back to courage, so you need to be courageous to do the right thing. But if you're too courageous, you're going to be rash and you're going to rush into a situation and basically harm yourself. If you're not courageous enough, you're going to be a coward and you're not going to be able to stand up for the things that you really believe in. So that's where temperance comes into it. And the last one's wisdom. So you need to have the wisdom to know what to do, and you need to have the wisdom to implement all of the other virtues. So that's kind of a really important one for the Stoics. And Epictetus has a quote, and he says, it's impossible for a man to learn that which he does not know. And I think that's a really wonderful quote, because obviously you can be very ignorant and kind of just pass through life thinking that you know everything, and it just, you need to be wise and kind of live up to them virtues.
Yeah, that's a great definition. Like that's a really, like, I didn't know some of that. Like I knew some of the things like about because wisdom seems to be that was a really important thing to the Stoics, wasn't it? It was like the pursuit of wisdom and how to live a good life and how to be a good man or a good person. That's what they were really into, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I love Stoicism because obviously a lot of people think that they kind of get into philosophy if you don't study it in an academic way. But what's so great about Stoicism is that it is the most practical out of all of the philosophies. It's literally made for you to go out in the real world and implement these practices in your life. Whereas a lot of other ancient philosophies like Plato's school and Aristotle's school, they're a lot more theoretical, so they're more removed from the world, where Stoicism is literally made to be in everyone's life every day. So that's one of the best things about this philosophy, is that even if you don't think you have a philosophical mindset, or you kind of get into philosophy because you don't maybe feel smart enough or something like that, you don't need to think anything like that when it comes to Stoicism. It's a very, very practical philosophy.
Yeah, I get that because it just makes sense, doesn't it? Like you say, when you're reading about it, yes, there's all these like ancient Greeks and Romans talking about, but even to this day, like what they're saying, you can totally apply it to your everyday life, well, your personal life or your business life or your studies or whatever you're doing. You can see how it can fit in, and it's all about how to live a good life and be a good person.
So like there's three main Stoics. You've got the three famous Stoics are Marcus Aurelius, which I'm sure some people would have heard about. I've got a copy of the Meditations here, which is a really good version. It's Gregory Hayes's translation, so I'd definitely recommend that if anyone wanted to learn more about Marcus Aurelius. But he's one of the three famous Stoics. And then you have Seneca, who was a famous Roman playwright and also tutor to the Emperor Nero, and that ended very badly for him. Nero ended up making him kill himself, basically, and it was a terrible end, but he was very courageous, and you'll find out if you delve into philosophy a lot more. A lot of the Stoics were either exiled or forced to kill themselves, and Socrates was the father of Western philosophy, and he ended up dying by execution. So the Athenian public sort of said that he was corrupting the youth and being unpious and not respecting the gods, even though he was a very, very amazing man, and he was religious, and he did support the gods, but they ended up executing him in 399 BC and making him drink hemlock. And the Stoics really admired him because he had a chance to escape his execution, and he basically didn't. He turned around and said, I'm not going to make death something scary for everyone else to remember us by. And Seneca kind of took that same approach. He literally died very willingly, and I think that's where courage obviously comes in for the Stoics. You have to be courageous and live up to whatever the fates bring you.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting stories when you start delving into them. But the third famous philosopher is Epictetus, and he was a slave for, I think it was about 20 years of his life, and then he got freed and started his own school. But it's such a diverse philosophy, like Emperor of Rome, tutor to another emperor, and Epictetus, and everyone in between. There's so many different Stoics out there, so I think that's why it's such a great philosophy, because it doesn't matter who you are, you can implement it in your life.
Yeah. So like you say, slaves, Roman emperors, Greek philosophers,
Really diverse.
business leaders, everyday people, sports athletes, you name it. It's, loads of people are into it. Like some of the words I scribbled down before was like kind of, acceptance and resilience and control.
Yeah.
Things that come out to me is like you say, that you hear stories of being exiled or a slave or like having some illness or some sort of damage to their body or whatever, and they just accept that that's just the way, like, bad things are going to happen. But you can,
inevitable.
yeah, and that's the other thing when I was getting into is like understanding that bad things will happen or people will do bad things, but you can't stop that necessarily. You can't control everything, but the one thing you can control is how you respond to those. That's what I love about it.
What Stoicism is. So like there's something called the dichotomy of control, and I probably should have mentioned this at the start when you asked us what Stoicism was, but it's literally what you just said there. It's separating what things that are in your control and things that are not in your control, because we spend so much of our lives, and I fall victim to this many times, that I still trip up when it comes to my thinking and stuff. But if you separate what you do control and what you don't control, you end up spending your time on the things that actually matter. Like, why try and change something that you have no autonomy over whatsoever? It makes no sense. It's just like running into a brick wall. Like, there's no point. But I've got 2 quotes from Epictetus somewhere, and it's basically talking about kind of the dichotomy of control. So what I just said, and yeah, I've got them here. So it says, I'll start with the bigger one first. But it says, the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals, not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself to the choices that are my own. And then there's another passage from him that basically distinguishes what is in our control and what is not. So it says, things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and in one word, whatever are not our actions. So what you just said there, basically, if you're in pain and stuff, you don't control that. You don't control whether you get sick. We're in a pandemic right now. We don't control whether we'll catch COVID-19, but we do control whether we'll wear a mask when we go outside, whether we practice social distancing, stuff like that. So if you really just think about what you do and you don't control, it makes your life so much easier, and it's such a simple thing to start with.
Yeah, I love it. Well, it's definitely. I think I said to you when I first started, when you were telling me about it, I was like, I think I'm a Stoic, and I didn't know it.
I remember that.
As well, but it was just like, yeah, it just makes total sense to me, and I think I've kind of been thinking along these lines for a while, but didn't know. I didn't have a name for it, but obviously I'm practicing. You know, I'm learning. I'm still learning, and I don't get it right all the time. But definitely, it's like a way of living, and it's a philosophy, but it's a really useful, practical way of living that's can prepare you for anything. I think that's the thing. It's like being in training for something that hasn't come yet, but when it does, you can.
Well, I think we're always in training on. We're always learning. Like, you never ever stop learning. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much experience you've had. There's always someone out there that can teach you something which you don't know. And there's probably like loads of people out there that are Stoics and they don't know it. It's just a mindset. It's just controlling your perceptions and not adding faulty value judgments to things. I think that's why I love it so much, because the freedom that comes from recognizing that, yeah, there's so many things in life that we don't control, but you actually can control your emotions, and well, not necessarily fully emotions, but you can control your thoughts about them, and you can control your mindset. And I think having a good, strong mindset is just an invaluable tool when it comes to life, and especially business. Like, if you're trying to put yourself out there in the business world, many people are going to fail. It's a sad reality, but many people are going to fail. But if you fail, you're one step closer to the thing that you're going to be successful at. So just, I don't think you ever stop learning. I think, yeah, never stop learning until you die.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like you say, even if you're failing or things aren't going your way, you're still learning.
Yeah, definitely.
That experience, so it's still a bonus. It's still a benefit to that. And I think we were saying before we started recording, like if you're never failing, you're probably not trying hard enough. Like you're probably just coasting along or playing it safe. But then even if you're playing it safe, something can go wrong. Like you can get ill, or something might change. Circumstances can change, and like you said before, the pandemic, like that's just pulled the rug from under everyone's feet. Whether you're playing it safe or putting yourself out there on a limb, like it's just caught everyone off guard. So it's just how you respond to that. And some people are obviously responding to it really badly, and others are a bit more prepared for it. So
I bet you, like, a lot of people, like during lockdown, it was a bit weird at first, obviously, but the people who chose not to look at this as an opportunity, whether it's just an opportunity to spend some quality time with your family, or to pick up a book that you've been wanting to read for forever, or to just start a course that you've wanted to do, there'll be people that did go down that route, and there'll be people that just sat on the couch for a few months, binge watch Netflix. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying, like, there's so many opportunities in what can be perceived as a negative situation, like, and it's just your perception of that situation. It's how you choose to say it. So there's actually this book, The Obstacle is the Way, which we're going to talk about a lot. But Ryan Holiday is an awesome author. He's the creator of the Daily Stoic, and I highly recommend that to anyone that enjoys today's video. But he talks about the 3 disciplines, and they're basically perception. So how you view the situation, how you perceive the world to be, and whether you say this is a good or bad thing. Then you have action, so whether you choose to move forward with something, whether you choose to have directed action towards a certain situation. And then you have the will. So the will is basically, it's like the only thing you actually control, and it's your internal will. So it's how you endure hardships or tough situations, and all of them basically make up your life and your world. And I think once you start learning about philosophy and kind of how you can at least control certain aspects of your life, it's very freeing. So
do you want to talk a little bit more about the obstacle is the way, what that actually means?
Yeah, definitely. So this, I don't know if you'll be able to see, it's a teeny weeny coin, which is from the Daily Stoic. Yay! And so it's got a mountain on the back, and it says the obstacle is the way on the front. And then it has a quote here, which is from Marcus Aurelius, and it says, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So a lot of people face obstacles in life. It's inevitable. We're all going to face hardships. And you can see that obstacle as an obstacle, or you can flip it and kind of see it as an opportunity for something. So for the Stoics, obviously going back to what we talked about at the start of the video, the 4 virtues, courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. Every obstacle is an opportunity to practice one of them 4 virtues. And it's just about kind of reframing your mindset when it comes to an obstacle. So I'm going to be honest here, like, this was quite a scary thing for me. Obviously, we talked about this beforehand, but I've wanted to put video content out there for ages, and it's self-doubt. I generally think you're your own worst enemy. But if you just kind of flip it and see the obstacle as an opportunity. So for me, this is an opportunity to get a little bit more confident, to maybe get a little bit closer to that end goal and achieve something that, yes, it's a little bit hard, but it's worth it in the long run. And you can kind of apply that to any obstacle that anyone's going through in life. There's an opportunity there for you to become a better person, for you to grow, to become a more virtuous person. And I think, going back to mindset again, it's all about how you perceive the situation, whether you perceive it to be a good thing or a bad thing. And we were talking about this actually with Newcastle Startup Week, weren't we, where it's like choosing not to do another event for a little while, that for some people might be like, why is he doing that? But for you, it makes complete sense. And I just think it's about like changing your perception with the obstacle. And it's very important to do that.
Yeah. Well, you're doing great. Everything that you're saying is spot on. So so I don't know how you're feeling. Maybe you're feeling nervous, or maybe you're more relaxed. But
I feel a little more relaxed now.
Relaxed once you got started. Once you're talking about something, I think that's the thing, because it's not like I'm asking you to talk about something you don't know.
Yeah.
About, like, you're really knowledgeable on this subject. So, and you do sound really great when you're talking about it. And then after this, you're gonna feel much more relaxed about doing another video in the future. So like you say, it might have been a challenge, or like a bit nervous doing it, and you needed maybe a bit of persuasion to do it. But yeah, like it's just going to be, you'll be doing loads of videos after this. You'll be no stopping you after this.
I just think I'm really happy. Like I'm done running away from things. Like you can either choose, like, this makes me feel uncomfortable, so I'm not going to do it. Or you can start to build a relationship with the things that make you uncomfortable in life. And if you choose to do that, kind of seek out obstacles as opposed to just wait for them to come your way, you're going to be such a stronger person for that. And I think it's just a choice. It's just a choice to say, yes, I'm going to put myself in this situation that is going to make me feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to grow because of it. And when the next one comes, I'm going to be a better person that's more able to deal with it.
Exactly. Well, like you say, if you feel a bit uncomfortable, it's because you're growing. You're doing something different. Yeah. So yeah, love it. Right. So that book, obviously, and the medallion. So I've got a medallion as well. Thanks to you. Thank you very much for that.
I do like it.
So yeah, so Ryan Holiday, obviously he's got that book out, the Obstacle is the Way, and you mentioned before the Daily Stoic. I've got that as well, and
yeah,
I love it. Like, it's the first thing I do when I get up every morning. When I have my breakfast, the first thing I do is read what the entry is for that day. So I mean, the entry for this day, the 25th of September, is all about the vulnerability of dependence, and basically saying that everybody's dependent on something, maybe addicted to something, even if it's just the comfort of doing, like, having a coffee every day, or just like your home comforts or whatever. So he's basically trying to say, try to reduce your dependency on that, because if that was suddenly taken away from you, then you can struggle with that. So I thought that was an interesting entry for day 5. Keep going, or pivot.
Definitely. I completely agree. We're all vulnerable and we're all depend on things, and whether it's just depending on negative emotions or kind of faulty value judgments. So say anxiety is just a habit. You've just got into a habit of kind of being anxious about something, and there's good vulnerability and there's bad, but it's so easy to be a slave. Like he mentions here, and all are slaves to fear. And I totally agree with that. I think so many people can kind of live a safe life because they're scared to ever break out of the comfort zone. And especially in a business context, when there's so many competitors out there, or there's so many rules to follow, it can be very hard to kind of give up certain dependencies. But it's very important to not be so dependable on a certain situation or a certain person. This is another reason why I love Stoicism so much. So it's very easy to be dependable on someone else, and it's healthy to be dependable on someone else to a certain extent. But Stoicism is all about self-sufficiency. So the Stoics say, basically, if you live in relation to your ruling rational faculty, I think the Greek word's logos, so apologies to anyone if the Greek and my pronunciation of that is just butchered. But yeah, so like by living in accordance with your rational nature, you become self-sufficient, and there's very little that can harm you. And that is literally why I love it so much, because there's not really much that can hurt you when it comes to adopting a Stoic mindset. And this is another thing that I love about it, but it's so easy to fall into a victim mentality throughout life. Whatever happens to you, you can be like, why did this happen to me, or why did that happen? And it's about, again, going back to the obstacles, sort of changing your mindset. But another thing is, like, I'm just going to go back to my partner maybe. So when you live with someone, you can kind of get on each other's nerves a little bit, and we're really good with each other. We don't like argue much or anything, but it's really easy to sort of blame him, say like, oh, why did he do that, or he's put us in a bad mood or something. And you've put yourself in that mood. And once I realized that fault, my mind was like blown. I was like, I choose to hand over my happiness to someone else because I think they've changed my mindset. And it's not, it's you've sort of changed your mindset for the worst. And once you realize that, it's one of the most freeing realizations that you can probably have. So it goes back to the self-sufficiency, and the Stoics generally believe that if you follow Stoicism, you are on a path to self-sufficiency in life.
Yeah.
And I generally believe that.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, there's lots of things that appeal about it, but that's one thing. Like I think I've always been quite self-sufficient, or like wanted to be quite self-sufficient and not too dependent on anything or anyone. But that doesn't mean that you're not caring or
Yeah.
a loving person or anything like that. So, I mean, even Marcus Aurelius, I think he had loads of kids, and I don't know how many wives he had, but he, it's not like it was
one wife apparently.
but it's not like he was just this uncaring, unfeeling person. It's just that kind of self-sufficiency and I don't know, like that. Yeah.
Well,
that
if
steely kind of control and determination that you put almost like, I don't know, bulletproof. I don't know. That's what I like about it.
I think if you adopt this mindset, you become somewhat bulletproof, because it doesn't matter what life throws at you. And believe me, it's going to throw every single situation your way. Like, you do not have a choice. Everything's coming. Pain, pleasure, whatever it is, it's coming your way. But there's a quote from Marcus Aurelius, and it encompasses what we're on about with the perception, the action, and the will. And it basically says objective judgment now at this very moment. So that is your perception. Be rational, be objective about this. Objective judgment now at this very moment. Unselfish action now at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment of all things external. That's all you need. So that encompasses all them three disciplines very well, because if you basically have objective judgment to the situation, you're not saying this is good or bad. If you have unselfish action, you're doing it for the common good, you're doing it for the people you love, not just yourself. And then if you have willing acceptance, it doesn't matter what comes your way, because you're going to accept it all. And if anyone reads the meditations, they'll be really surprised at how much Marcus Aurelius talks about the common good. He says it so many times. And this is a man that had ultimate power. He could do anything that he wanted to do. And he was such a virtuous human that it blows my mind. I think he's my favorite out of all the Stoics, although Seneca was my introduction to Stoicism. So I actually found out about Stoicism from Tim Ferriss. He has a video called How to Apply Stoic Philosophy to Your Life. And I ended up watching that video, I think it was the back end of 2017. And I ended up watching the video, and I wasn't really into philosophy that much, but I clicked on the video because I've always sort of like self-help stuff and vloggers and things like that. So I watched it, and he mentioned letters to Lucilius, which is basically letters between Seneca and Lucilius. So Lucilius was his friend, and Seneca was just sending them letters to kind of help them with daily life. So Lucilius is complaining about life at court, or how he's worried about losing his property and things like that. And at the time I was going through some personal stuff. So obviously I've talked about this with you. My mum wasn't very well, and she was at the end of stage COPD, so she had about 7 months left to live. And at the time I was going back and from my flat, so I would either ride on my little BMX to her house, or I would walk with Lily, my little border terrier. And if I walked, I would stick headphones in to listen to a podcast or an audiobook. And I actually remember the day that I was listening to this. So I downloaded Seneca's letters because I watched the video, and I was walking over my mum's, and I stuck my headphones in, and my headphones just weren't working. So I had a choice. I was a bit frustrated already going over, and I was like, I can either not listen to anything and just walk there completely silent and back, oh, I can just blast Seneca out my phone. So I just ended up blasting this audiobook out my phone walking down. And I just generally didn't care what people think. And I was so happy because obviously, like I said, he was on about just general everyday life problems. And it was really humbling to kind of realize that no matter what century it is or what time you're living through, everyone's had problems. Everyone's been going through something that you're going through. And it was really nice to just kind of be taken away from what I was going through and realizing that like so many people before me have gone through this and so many people in the future will go through that too. So it's really humbling.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's a good story. That you're just playing it, even though you didn't have your headphones. You still played it, and you still got to listen to it, and it still helped you through that, because that must have been, well, I know it was a very, very tough time for you. I mean, talking about audiobooks, so obviously we're talking about books, so I've got meditations on your recommendation. I've got the Daily Stoic. I've got your but the first thing that I got was an audiobook, the How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, the Stoic philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. So that's an audiobook that I listened to on Audible, and that guy, I mean the author Donald Robertson, he's got a great accent anyway. He's Scottish, isn't he? But because I just love it. I'm really into history anyway, so it's like part history, part kind of biography, and also the Stoic philosophy. So it's the three things that I find really interesting. So at the start of this year, I just had it on in the flat when I was just pottering around, just doing stuff, just had it on, and it was really good for me, like listening to that. I think I spent like a week just listening to it off on and off, and it just got me in a really good frame of mind for everything that's happened this year.
So you've been through quite a lot this year, haven't you? Like a lot in terms of personal and professional life. So I think that's why I think Stoicism, I've told a lot of people about it, and like you are generally the first person that has like actually gone away and picked up the book or listened to something. And I think when I think about it, I think it might be because you're more likely to go towards Stoicism if you're going through something personally. And I found it at a difficult time, and obviously you found it at a time of transition. So yeah, it's just wonderful that I actually spoke to someone and that actually listened to the book. Great.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, that's how I see it. I just think it came at the right time. Like the conversations we were having came at the right time, and I was already kind of in that. I was open to new ways of thinking because of stuff that was going on. And then I think I told you I read this other book which is a lot more kind of spiritual, and it's all about thoughts become things, and how it kind of similar along the same lines of like controlling your thoughts, because if you think negative things, if you dwell on negative things or things that have gone wrong, then you can make things worse, because if you get stuck in that mindset. But if you focus on the positives or where you want to get to, and it's not just thinking it, it's like following it up with positive real world action as well. And that's the key thing that really resonated with me, that book where it was all about thoughts become things. So that book really opened my mind to a new way of thinking. Again, stuff I was already doing, but I didn't really know I was doing it. But just think, I'm going to make a point of thinking along these ways. And then talking to you about Stoicism followed on really, really nicely from that, because it was more of a practical application to the way of thinking, the Stoic way of thinking and living. So, but yeah, I mean, that's why I think it's important that you do this video, these interviews, or keep doing what you're doing through the Savvy Stoic and sharing stuff on social media and all the other stuff that you want to do in the future. Because the more people that get to hear about it, the more people you can potentially help.
Well, this is like, I'm really grateful to you, because although I've helped you by introducing you to Stoicism, you have, until you had kind of took an interest in Stoicism. I didn't really post much about it. It was like it's a personal philosophy anyways, but it's also very important to think about the community and everyone else. And if anyone reads Meditations, they'll obviously see how much he's grappling with that. But I didn't post about it. I just thought, like, well, maybe who's going to be bothered about this, even though I listen to Daily Stoic every single day. So where was my logic in that? But yeah, like, I'm really grateful because obviously you take an interest in our wonderful conversations that we've had about it and stuff like that. It's pushed us down the direction of being more vocal about it, and I'm sure I would have got there at some point, but maybe not as fast as I have gotten there. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
Good, and I'm grateful to you for talking about it to us, because it get me interested in it. So yeah, definitely you need to keep doing what you're doing and do more of it, even if it's just for yourself. But I don't think it is just for yourself. Anybody else who hears you talking with so much knowledge and passion about it is going to be enthused about it. So yeah, definitely keep doing it, because it got me interested in it. So what, we've got some other things written down here about so we've talked about the how to think like a Roman emperor, meditation, Daily Stoic, obstacle is the way. Some of the other things like the Memento Mori.
Yeah, that's it. So there's a lot of different Stoic principles which we'll touch on, but Memento Mori is one of the core ones. And basically, Memento Mori is a Latin phrase, and it translates to English to remember you will die, or remember you must die, I think it is. And it's obviously contemplating your own mortality. And in today's, if you think back to the ancient time, like, death was around everyone. It was just people were dying left, right, and centre. And Marcus Aurelius, I think, actually lost 8 of his children. So, like, death for him was just a part of life. And I think in our society, it's quite a taboo. Obviously, you don't want to think about the people you love and things like that dying, but there's value to be found in it, kind of like what we're talking about with the obstacle. If you flip the obstacle and see it as an opportunity, what I see as Memento Mori and the benefit that I get from it is that you think about your mortality, but in doing so, it's not like a morbid practice. It's kind of a practice that gives you appreciation for your life. So if you think about the fact that you're going to die one day, everyone you love is going to die too. It's not a nice thought, but it's a thought that can allow you to appreciate your life and also be nicer to the people around you. Because, like, death is certain, but it's like the most uncertain certainty that's out there. You don't know when you're going to die, you don't know how you're going to die, and you hope that you wake up tomorrow. Like, Seneca talks about kind of how you should end each day thinking about how you've gone through the day, what you've done, what you've enjoyed, and then if you wake up tomorrow morning, you should look at it as a bonus. So, like, you shouldn't expect to wake up tomorrow morning. That is very true. Like, death is a part of life, and you're going to die. And if you think about it in a positive way, it's going to allow you to focus your energy on the things that actually matter. It's going to allow you to do your most valuable work, and it's going to allow you to love the people around you. Because if you get into a petty argument with the other half or something, you've got a choice. You can continue the argument, or you can just go up to them, give them a hug and say I love you, and walk away. And just, if you think about that you're going to die, like, what option's a better option? You might as well choose the nicer option and just appreciate everyone that's in your life. And I think it's one of my favorite practices. So I've got this on my desk, and it basically, it's a skeleton holding a crossbow, and it's got a little French. I can't translate it because it's in French, but it's basically a little, like, quote, and it's got a little sand timer at the bottom, and obviously the time's running out for everyone. And it's just a really nice reminder to remember that we're mortal. Remember, every day is a gift, and tomorrow you might not wake up. And I think it's easy for me to say this because I've been around a lot of deaths. So by the time I was 20, I'd lost both my parents, I'd lost a very close friend. But you can choose to look at it in a certain way. You can look at it like, why did this happen to me? Or you can choose to look at it in a way that this makes me stronger. And everyone that's in my life, I'm just going to love them as best I can because that's all I have. Yeah. So it's one of my favorite Stoic principles, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I love it as well because it's like you say, some people might think it's a bit morbid, but it's not. It's positive. Well, because it's usually skeletons or skulls, but it's a positive because like you say, everybody's going to die at some point. You just don't, sooner or later. You don't know, but that yeah, like you say, I think people often put things off. They think, oh, I'll do it in the future, or I'll do it when such and such is right, or when circumstances are perfect and stuff like that. And then they might never get around to doing it, and then they die. Yeah. So yeah, there's actually a bit on the back of this meditations book that says, live each day as if it were your last.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, and then one of my favorite ever videos, you've probably seen it. It's Steve Jobs giving an address to Stanford University.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's such a great video, and he's talking there about how one of the best things was when he realized he wasn't going to live forever, that because he got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer for the first time, and the doctor basically said, you need to get your affairs in order, but he did live for years later, but he did eventually, unfortunately, die. But he just said that was a really good thing for him to realize that time was limited, so he wanted to make the most of the time that he had left. And bloody hell, he really did make the most of his time on Earth. He did some incredible stuff. So yeah, I think that is a really good thing. Memento Mori. I've got a picture on the wall as well. You've seen.
You've got one. I've got one here. So this middle one's a Memento Mori. But I think another thing that's great about it is like, we get bothered about so many things that don't matter. And if you get stressed about something, say you're really worried about, let's just say, starting a business or deciding to pivot or doing a presentation, it doesn't matter how big or small it is. Mm-hmm. If you think I'm going to die one day and none of this is going to matter, it's really humbling. Like when I get really stressed about something, believe it or not, I'm still a normal person and I love Stoicism, but I still fall prey to emotions and everything. But what helps is when I get really stressed is I just think one day this will all be over and none of it will matter at all. It's a really, really humbling thought.
Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius has a quote and it says, you could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think. And it's a really nice quote. I love it.
Yeah, well, I was going to say he's an amazing man, but you know, it's nearly 2,000 years ago. That's amazing that this is carried on, you know, but a lot of people have forgotten about it. But it's actually, once you get into it, you realize there's lots of other things that have been influenced by it, and you can see the traces of Stoicism throughout history ever since. Just people maybe give it a different label or add another layer on top of it. But it's amazing that people were thinking this way so long ago, and it's still really relevant to now.
Yeah, I think like there's so many people that have obviously kept Stoicism going, and in terms of like text from the early Stoics, we've got fragments, that's about it. So from Zeno, Chrysippus and Cleanthes, we've just got very small amounts, they were like the teachers of the early Stoic. But Marcus Aurelius and obviously many other people kept the tradition going, and that's kind of what I hope to do, is just to even if no one finds this interesting, I've still kept some of the things going, and that's what matters.
Just find it interesting.
I'm not allowing it to die. And like I was listening to something with Ryan Holiday and Tim Ferriss, it's like a podcast episode yesterday, and they were on about how Seneca, so I've got some Seneca's quotes here, if you kind of took his name off it and chucked a little bit of modern day like jargon into it, you would think it was written like in the last decade, because he's so straight to the point. It's really wonderful. But there's a quote here from Seneca, and it says, he who fears death will never do anything worth of a man who is alive. And like, you shouldn't fear death, because it's coming for you regardless, and you can really, really turn it into a tool that allows you to live your best life. And it's hard, it's really, really hard, but you don't have a choice. Like, you really do not have a choice. It's coming for you. So if you choose to accept death and embrace it and actually see it as fuel to live a good life, then you're gonna be in a much better position.
Yeah, that picture you've got there, the frame picture, I think I've seen that image with the crossbow. It's almost like he's pointing it at you, and he's saying,
Eye level.
he's kind of saying, live a good life, or I'm going to shoot you. That's kind of that's how I think. That's how I see that. It is.
No, definitely.
It's warning you. But yeah. So what else have I got written here? Yeah.
I have loads of quotes, but like there's too many quotes to kind of find the right quote. There's another good one about Memento Mori from Marcus here, like Marcus Aurelius, and it says, "Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly." So again, it's kind of changing your perception. Like I haven't lived my life the best up until this point, but every single opportunity is a chance for you to change and get on the right path. It's just a choice. It's just a simple little choice. Yeah. This is really wonderful. But
every day is a chance to.
Exactly, it's a bonus.
Yeah. No, but it's a chance to do something different. Like, I don't know, you're still really young. Like, I mean, like, you've got, well, hopefully, who knows? But you've got, you know, you hopefully you've got a long life ahead of you. But like, yeah, like every day is a chance to give it a go and try something new. And yeah, like, you're not stuck. Like, you're only stuck if you think you're stuck.
Yeah, it's going back to that perception, isn't it? You're only stuck if you tell yourself you're stuck. Like, if you believe that you're in a situation that's a positive, then it's fine. It's gonna be fine. But like, Memento Mori is just one of the different principles that are part of Stoicism. So there's many, but there's one called Amor Fati, and there's a Nietzsche quote I've actually got. So this is my other coin that I have, and it's Amor Fati. I was really a bit sad because I ordered, like, do you remember how we were talking before and I said I had these and pretty much everything from the Daily Stoic store apart from the other coins, the medallion set. So I ordered the medallion set thinking it would turn up for this so I could like hold them up. It's 2 weeks delayed. It's tragic, but I'm just being a Stoic and accepting it. But yeah, Amor Fati is basically, it's got a quote on the back from Nietzsche, so Friedrich Nietzsche, and it says, "Not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it." And this is probably one of the hardest Stoic principles for me, well, when I first started out, to get used to. But it's going back to the obstacles thing as well. It's kind of, if this has happened to you, then you might as well see it as a positive, because you don't have another option. Like, literally, Amor Fati, you might as well love it, love whatever happens to you. And it's another amazing principle, but there's so many great ones. It's really wonderful.
No, I wasn't sure what that meant, but that, again, that's a good explanation. I need to look more into that because yeah, you just gotta, like, say, accept it and love it because it's here, and instead of, yeah, it goes back to that acceptance. And yeah.
Well, there's other ones. There's one that's very relevant to business. I suppose all of them are in a certain like sense. But there's something called premeditatio malorum. I hope I pronounced that right. I think I have. But it's a Latin phrase, and it basically translates to the premeditation of evil. So, do you know how you've got positive visualization and you think of all the things that you want to happen and are good? This is kind of a negative visualization. So you imagine everything that could go wrong. And by doing so, the Stoics believed you kind of became a little bit, you just became stronger because you're not going to be taken off guard. You're not going to be thrown off guard by the things that are probably going to happen or could happen. You've already thought about them in advance, and maybe if you thought about them, you could create a plan to move forward, but you don't have to. It's just about thinking about what could go wrong so that if that does happen, you've already thought about it and you're not shocked by what's taking place.
Yeah. Most people don't like to think about things that could go wrong, and I think actually that's probably a positive and a negative of like a lot of entrepreneurs or creative types is that definitely entrepreneurs tend to be optimists. You know, they think, oh yeah, this is going to be great, it's going to be amazing, and you kind of have to convince yourself and other people around you that something's going to work out, and but at the same time have that realistic, like honest approach to it as well, and think of all the things that could go wrong, so you can be better prepared. But I had it in May. There was a guy had a talk about red team thinking. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it's like a military term where in the army they'll have a blue team and a red team. And in the red team, it's their job to think of all the things that could possibly go wrong with a mission, and just like pull it apart and destroy it and try to like take out the army and whatever. And it's just so that they're better prepared for all the things that could go wrong. And there's a group of guys who are now trying to teach that way of thinking into the business world as well.
Well, it makes sense. Like, although it, like you said, it's good to believe in yourself and think that things are going to work out, but there's a chance that things aren't going to work out. So you don't have to allow thinking about the negative things to take away from your positive attitude.
Yeah.
You just have to be more, like what you said, realistic about it, because hopefully things don't go wrong, but it's life and things do sometimes go wrong. So if you've thought about it, you might be able to put a plan in place. If say it's in relation to a business, say you don't get the funding you want and you weren't sure you were going to get the funding, maybe you could have wrote up a proposal to get funding from somewhere else before that had happened. But it's just, I think it's a healthy thing to think about what could go wrong. Maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist. I don't know.
No, I think well, healthy pessimism. It's balance, I suppose, because actually there was an entry in there a few weeks ago, I think, about there's a few examples where they talk about people who were captured in Vietnam, and
James Stockdale.
I think it was, and it's very saying that the people that found it the hardest were the optimists.
Yeah.
You thought, oh, like everything will be all right in a couple of weeks' time, and
I think I read that one too.
And like in a couple of weeks came and it wasn't any better, and then they were really devastated because they always thought, oh yeah, everything's gonna be fine soon, and it didn't. But the ones that were a bit more measured and like, well, yeah, you want to hope it's gonna get better, but we're not gonna get too carried away with it at the same time. So yeah, that was quite an interesting read.
I think I remember it too, because they were saying like some of them were thinking, well, I'll get out by Christmas,
Yeah.
I'll get out by New Year, and then it kept coming to that time, and they never got out. But James Stockdale talks about when the obstacle is the way. It's one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard. So obviously he was a prisoner of war for Vietnam, and apparently he'd learned a little bit about Epictetus in school, and obviously his plane got shot down. As he was going down, he said to himself, I am leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. And apparently, like, he was the highest ranking general in there, so he created this thing called unity over self, where there was a lot of people under him that were kind of feeling really bad because they were giving away secrets or saying things that they felt like they shouldn't say. But he was like, no, it's all right that this is happening. But apparently one of the stories I heard about him was that the people that were capturing him were taking him out to like a news show to kind of, he was meant, what do you call it, when they kind of like give in, like I don't know what it's called. But anyways, he got told to clean up, and basically they took him to the bathroom and he had a shaver because they wanted him to shave and some soap to get clean, and he knew that he couldn't clean himself up and go out to these film crews. So instead of getting clean, he cut his scalp open, literally to like obviously make himself look terrible. And there was a stool and he bashed his face in with the stool, and he turned around to the people that were keeping him captured and basically said, tell your people that the captain isn't going out. And he was just such a strong person. It was an amazing story.
I didn't know he'd done it. I read that he did something, but I didn't realize what he'd actually done to himself, because he didn't want to go out and be all like present. He didn't want it to look like he was being well looked after and everything was great, and he wanted to, so he couldn't go on TV because he was
Yeah,
such
that was nice. It was so much courage, like so much courage. And there's another, this leads quite well in sort of one of another Stoic principles, and it's called sympathia. So it means basically recognizing the mutual interdependence of everyone in the universe, and recognizing how important it is to care about the common good and other people. So obviously Stockdale knew that if he had left, or if he had like gone out, it's kind of all of the men that had died fighting for that cause, he was just being like, it would have been in vain. So he didn't think about himself in that situation, he thought about everyone else. And that's what this philosophy is about. It's obviously about improving your character and becoming a better person, but you're doing that for the community. You're doing it to be a better person so you can help your community and you can help the people you love and you care about. So it's just an all-round beautiful philosophy, I think, really.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I'm really glad that I got into it, and grateful to you for educating me on it. So if people want to find out more about it, obviously we've talked about a lot of books, but if people want to find out more about what you're doing, and how do they do that? How do they follow you? Like where?
So Twitter is basically, I need to change my handle, because Instagram, I'm at the _Savvy Stoic. And Twitter, for some reason, is just my name. So it's at Katie_Stidolph, but I'm thinking about changing that to the Savvy Stoic. And then Instagram, I've said, but LinkedIn, I'm just Katie Stidolph. But to be honest, I'm terrible with LinkedIn. So like Twitter and Instagram, definitely the best places to go to. But I've also created like a landing page sort of that expresses what the Savvy Stoic is, because obviously I'm going to do a project module because I study classics, business and philosophy at Newcastle Uni. So I'm doing a project module in which I get to create a website. So it's going to be the Savvy Stoic, and it's going to be all about how you can implement the practices which we've talked about in order to live a good life. And definitely check out all the books I've mentioned, but I haven't showed my beautiful book. So this is one of the most stunning things I've ever bought from the Daily Stoic site, and it's basically, it's the book that you showed up before, the Daily Stoic page a day journal, or page a day book. But it comes with this beautiful little thing, which is like a letterpress stamp from Ryan Holiday. And it's like a leather bound edition of it. So it's all gold, which is, I actually love it. But this is like my upgrade this year. So from that other one, I kind of just read this every morning after my 20-minute meditation. I love it. So I definitely recommend, if anyone enjoyed this, just to pick up one of these, because it's a really good starting point. It's got all the different Stoics. It's got Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus, and then it's got a quote, and it kind of explains the quote for the day, and it's got one for every single day. So it's just amazing. But yeah, definitely Instagram, Twitter, and I'll post the landing page in the comments, and then people can just kind of go from there.
Brilliant. Okay, love it. Thanks again, Katie. All right, we'll leave it there, and then all right. See ya.
Bye.